Yep. Now you stop sharing the screen.
Done.
And now share only the PPT. Only that tab you share.
Okay.
So now everything is clear. Now start, what is that? Start slide share. Oh, something is blocking. You have poor network or what?
I don't know, ma'am. Let me connect it with some other.
No. Actually, that black bar, what is that? You can see all the video audio option. No, that is blocking the screen.
Ma'am, I have moved it to the down.
I can see that. Better stop sharing and reshare again.
Is it okay now?
No, now also same. It's okay. It's okay. Oh, now keep as it is. Keep that in the up only, upside.
Okay. Is it okay now, ma'am?
Okay. Something is opened in the middle, below the L2.
Okay, my.
Yep. So you can turn on your video also.
Ma'am, while turning my video, just let me know how to. Okay. I got it.
You can choose the colors also there, right?
Yes, ma'am.
It's better if you write with the yellow, green, like that colors on the black screen, because in the mobile red color will not be properly visible in the black background.
Okay. So can I just do whatever I want to do here now? Because as I'm already live.
Yeah, wait for a few minutes and then you start the class.
Okay, ma'am.
I'll be listening the class, and you have to do one more thing.
Yes, ma'am.
If you go to participants there,
Yes.
in the participant there is an option mute. If you click
Mute
on
all.
mute all, if you click on it, there will be a box. No, you
Yes,
uncheck
ma'am.
that box. Not now, because I cannot talk if you uncheck.
Yes, ma'am.
Presently, you can close that.
Okay.
But you can close the entire thing. Later on, you can uncheck and you can click on mute all,
Okay, ma'am.
so that students cannot disturb the class by talking in between. And yes, open the chat box.
I will keep it.
In the chat box, where there is an option. No. Don't make it large.
No, I'm not making. I'm just sliding it to one side.
Okay. But yeah, now if you open this, no, it is blocking actually.
Okay, so what to do now?
You can close that. But before closing, you do one thing there. In the bottom right corner,
Yes.
you can see 3 dots.
Yes, ma'am.
Click on it.
Done.
And there, chat with only host and co-host.
Okay, done.
You can make me co-host now. You close this chat box. If anybody chat in the, if anybody message in the chat box, then it will get pop.
Okay.
Yep, now mute everybody. That is good. Now you can close this also. Shivangi, is it done?
Yes, ma'am. Can I keep chat box open?
No. Now you please close the chat box, because the chat box and the toolbar, all these are blocking the screens.
Okay.
So for now, you close it. If anybody message in the chat box, Then this toolbar will pop. Then you can
Okay,
open, you can read, and you can close.
okay, ma'am.
So now everything is fine. You can start the class after 4 minutes. No problem. Aram say you do know, not more students will come.
Okay.
You can turn on. And one more thing is that my internet, and I mean entire network in the campus is very slow today. I
Okay.
don't know how much time I can be connected. Let's see.
Okay, ma'am.
Have you turned on your video?
No, not yet.
Turning on the video, this is compulsory throughout the session if you have a good network.
But I'm not getting why this bar is shown. When you were doing that, I can't see any bar over there.
That is what actually what I can say. Because of the poor network connection, sometimes if we have a poor network issue, then the screen cannot be visible properly.
Okay.
After, yeah, now you stop sharing and you share it again. Maybe it may be clear. You have YouTube in your mobile,
Yes, ma'am.
so then you can see the YouTube chats also, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Then that's great. You can take care of the class entirely. Share, reshare. Mm. Again, the problem is there. Okay, no problem. You continue.
Okay, ma'am.
You are starting. You have to technical poll.
Here only is that technical poll, ma'am, visible to the YouTubers also?
No. It is not visible to YouTubers. Then tell them to answer in the live chat if you are audible on properly or screen is visible properly or not.
Okay, ma'am.
Hmm. Shivangi, yes, you can start the class. Start recording also. Record to the cloud. Yeah, you start the class.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Today we are going to start with our next topic or the next class with our human health and disease. So before starting that, please answer me in a poll that I'm audible and visible to you. Okay, so let's start our today's class. So our today's class is based on the next topic. In a previous class, we have already studied about the different types of disease and the mode of disease, that how the disease get being transmitted. So today we are going to talk about some new diseases on some new topics. But before that, we have to do a recall question so that we are able to recall whatever we have done. Okay, so your today's first recall question is, how are infectious disease transmitted? The mode of transmission of your infectious disease. The answer you can launch in your this poll. Your answer options are: A, droplet infection; B, they are inherited by seeing patient; or eating an unhealthy diet. Now you can give your answer through the poll, and the poll's timing had already started, so it's being 20 seconds. So what is the way through this infectious disease can be transmitted? You have four options: A, droplet infection; B, they are inherited; C, they are seen by patient; or D, by eating an unhealthy food. Okay, so as we have already discussed in a previous class, the infectious disease can be spreaded by air, water, or food. But here we have given the four options. The option A says droplet infection, like if some person having cold, okay, and when he sneezes without covering his nose and mouth, at that time the mucus and the fluid of his body comes out in the form of droplet containing that infectious agent, right? Option B says they are inherited. That means that disease is genetic. But we have already studied, if a disease is already inherited in a gene, then it cannot be transmitted to another person without by touching or by seeing, right? So option C, by seeing a patient, we are unable to get a disease. Option D says by eating unhealthy food. See, eating unhealthy food causes some deficiency, but they never lead to the disease. Okay, we have already studied the difference between the disease and the deficiency. So only option left here is the droplet infection. Okay, so droplet infection is our correct answer for the question that how are infectious disease transmitted. Is it clear to everyone? Okay, so now we are moving towards our today's topic, but and today we are going to cover our main major topics will be primary lymphoid organ, secondary lymphoid organ, and tissue cells, which are going to make our complete immune system of our body. If we have to fight some enemy, we have to prepare some enemy, some force. So this immune organs and these cells are making our army, which is going to fight against those enemies. That means your foreign elements, which are going to disturb your body, so you can fight with them. Then there is type of immunity. Now, our body is not always having a single kind of defense mechanism. Like in our country, we have several forces which are working as a defense force. Okay, we have military. In a military, we have air force, we have land force, we have navy, right? Water force. So, according to that, our immunity also has different types. Then antibody, allergy, vaccination and immunization, and the last is immune system disease. Okay, so let's start with our first, that is lymphoid organ. What are these lymphoid organs? These are the organs where the maturation and proliferation of lymphocytes takes place, right? You have already studied about the lymphocytes. What are lymphocytes? These lymphocytes are the form of WBCs, right? We have already studied in our earlier classes that WBCs are of two forms. They can be granulocyte or they can be agranulocyte, right? So from that, we have also got are this lymphocytes, which is the defense, which are making the defense mechanism of our body. So these lymphoid organs are responsible for the production, maturation, and proliferation of our lymphocytes. Let's take a look for our different types of lymphocytes. They can be divided into two different classes. First is our primary lymphoid organ, and another is our secondary lymphoid organ. Why we have classified them into primary and secondary? The main reason is in a primary lymphocyte, they are just getting produced and mature. Okay. But in a secondary lymphoid organ, they are actually getting differentiated. So the difference here is that primary lymphocyte is responsible for the production and maturation, whereas these secondary lymphocytes are responsible for their differentiation depending on the antigen or the foreign element they are going to encounter. Okay, so in primary lymphocyte, we are just making our lymphocytes. So the primary lymphoid organs contain bone marrow and thymus. Now, let's have a deep look onto this lymphoid organs. So the first is primary lymphoid organs. As I said, these lymphoid organs are responsible for the production. So we have two major types of lymphocyte. First is T lymphocyte and another is B lymphocyte. So these are the two major lymphocytes which are going to produce by this primary lymphoid organ. And as I have already told you, the primary lymphoid organ contain the bone marrow and the thymus. So bone marrow and thymus are our primary lymphoid organs. Now, have a look at bone marrow. You can see the picture in a given. This is our bone marrow. Okay. The bone marrow, sabne suna hai, it is present in the longest bone of our body. Bone marrow is found in the longest bone of our body. When the cells are produced, you have heard about that in embryonic stage or in an embryo, the blood cells are produced by the liver of the embryo. But when the embryo develops, it turns into fetus and infant, then the production of blood cells continues from the bone marrow, which is found in the longest bone of the body. Which is the longest bone of the body? Femur, that is the thigh bone. Okay, so this bone marrow is responsible for the production of all types of blood cells. If we are talking about the blood cells, we are not only talking about the red blood cells, white blood cells, or the platelets. We are talking about all these three. इनमें से कोई differentiate नहीं करना कि हम bright blood बनाएंगे, white blood cell बनाएंगे, या सिर्फ और सिर्फ प्लेटलेट्स बनाएंगे. नहीं, ये तीनों को बनाएगा. ठीक है, तो हमारे यहाँ पे तीनों सेल्स प्रोड्यूस होंगे, आरबीसी, डब्ल्यूबीसी एंड platelets. Okay, so bone marrow is the main lymphoid organ where blood cells, mark this thing, blood cells, that means we are talking about all the three blood cells are going to be produced, including our lymphocytes, which are the differentiated white blood cells. Okay, and in bone marrow, the maturation of B lymphocyte take place. Okay, here T lymphocytes are not getting mature, only the B lymphocytes are getting mature. Next is our thymus. This thymus is a bilobe structure which is present just above the heart. Okay, it is present near the heart in a chest region, and the thymus keep on degrading, or the size of the thymus keep on decreasing when the age increases of a person. Okay, so at the time of birth, the size of thymus is large, but as the person getting older, the size of thymus keep on decreasing. Okay, so by the time of birth or after aging, the thymus keep on reducing. Okay, this is the site for the T cell maturation. If we are talking about the thymus leads to the maturation of T lymphocyte. So we have two primary lymphoid organ, bone marrow and thymus. Bone marrow is responsible for the maturation of B lymphocyte and thymus is responsible for the maturation of T lymphocyte. Okay. Now move to our secondary lymphoid organ. Now we have already produced the lymphocyte and we have already matured. Now we want them to proliferate and differentiate according to their function. We want them to assign a particular function, right? So for that, we have the secondary lymphoid organ, which are responsible for the proliferation and differentiation. Okay, so here the required immune response to antigen. Up for the differentiation, we need to find out what types of enemies we have, what type of foreign elements we are going to encounter. Okay, so depending on those antigens, those foreign elements, we are going to make our different types of lymphocyte. Okay, so the differentiation of our lymphocytes only depends on the type of antigen they are going to encounter. Okay, so they require an immune response to antigen. Okay, so without antigen, they are unable to make a differentiated lymphocytes. Okay, now these secondary lymphocytes organ contains lymph nodes, spleen, tonsils, Peyer's patch of the small intestine, and mucosal associated lymphoid tissue. As the name says, mucosal associated lymphoid tissue, that is mud. So these tissue are already found on those areas where mucus is produced. So where mucus is produced? In the respiratory sites, okay, in genital sites. So these are the regions where these mucosal associated lymphoid tissues are found. Okay, is it clear to everyone? Okay, so now move to our first sites. Okay, so as I said, lymph nodes. Lymph nodes are of different types. First, we are going to talk about the tonsils. These tonsils are found at the side of our throat. If you go for our buccal cavity, you can see at the back side of our tongue. On the both side of the tongue, these tonsils are found. Okay, so they get inflamed. They get inflamed when they encounter any infection. If any infection happens there, their size get enlarged. Okay, then these lymph nodes are also found in your armpit, under your armpits. Along with that, they are also found near the genital region. Okay, so these lymph nodes are found in at the several places of our body. Okay, and these lymph nodes are actually doing the work to filter the lymph and trap the antigen. So they are filtering the lymph so that they can they can trap the antigen. Okay, apart from that, we have the another lymphoid tissue or organ, that is spleen, which is also known as the graveyard of WBC. Right, if you ever heard, the spleen are also said to be the graveyard of WBCs. Here the WBC, that means our blood get filtered. So if we are talking about the spleen, in spleen the blood get filtered or checked for the presence of any antigen. If any kind of antigen or microorganism is present in the blood, they get trapped through this spleen, and spleen also helps in the proliferation of the our lymphocytes. Then we have the Peyer's passage, which is present in a small intestine. They are very small white color patches which are present on the inner side or the inner wall of our small intestine to prevent the infection. Okay, they prevent the infection in small intestine. Okay, so is this clear to everyone? So these are secondary lymphoid organs. Now, we are going, before moving further, let's talk about the lymphoid organs are responsible for. Your question is, the lymphoid organs are responsible for what? They are responsible for, your options are A, proliferation of lymphocytes, B, differentiation of lymphocyte, C, destruction of lymphocytes, and D, maturation of lymphocyte. See, now we have the different options. You have to give your answer through the poll that lymphoid organs are responsible for which response. They help in the proliferation of lymphocyte, differentiation of lymphocyte, destruction of lymphocyte, or maturation of lymphocyte. Please give your response in this poll. 5 seconds are left. Okay. Okay, so when we are talking about this, so see, we have studied already that lymphoid organs are responsible for all proliferation, maturation, and differentiation. But here we are talking about the not responsible stuff. Okay, the lymphoid organ is not responsible. We have just studied they are responsible for proliferation, they are responsible for differentiation, they are responsible for maturation, but they never destroy our lymphocytes, right? uh, the destruction of lymphocytes never takes place in our lymphoid organ. So this is our correct answer. Okay, so this is our correct answer for this question, that lymphocyte organ or lymphoid organs are not responsible for the destruction of lymphocytes. Now, moving towards the immunity, we have several types of immunity. The basic differentiation or basic, we can say the immunity is differentiated on the basis of its function. So initially we are dividing immunity into two groups. First is adaptive immunity, second is innate immunity. And after that, the adaptive immunity is further differentiated into natural immunity, artificial adaptive immunity, and these two subdivisions of adaptive immunity have their further divisions. The natural immunity can be passive, it can be active, and artificial immunity can also be passive or active. Okay, we are going to discuss about each and every type of this immunity in a further class. So initially we have to understand that immunity is broadly classified into two categories. First is innate immunity, second is adaptive immunity. Is this clear up till now? Okay. So before moving, the innate immunity, this is the immunity which can be specific or non-specific. If we are talking about the innate immunity, it has the four types of barrier, depending on which it can be specific or non-specific. So initial barrier is physiological barrier. Okay, if we are talking about the physiological barrier, उसमें आता है हमारा skin. The skin is the largest organ which provides us the defense mechanism. Okay, then we have, if we are talking about our body, see, our body is completely covered with the skin. So there is no chance of a microorganism to enter inside the body except some areas such as our eye, nose, mouth, and genital region. These are the openings where the covering of skin is not present. Okay. So for that, if the microorganism enters in our body through these passages, then we have the another, that is mucosal lines. Okay. The mucosal lines and the digestive enzyme, that is HCl, which is found in the stomach. Okay, so here we can say, अगर skin हमारी काम नहीं कर पाई, अगर skin fail हो जाती है, okay, if the skin is not there और स्किन के थ्रू हमारा जो पैथोजन है बॉडी में एंटर नहीं कर रहा है, इन दैट केस वी हैव द अनदर बैरियर. ओके, दैट इज द म्यूकोजल लाइन ऑफ आवर रेस्पिरेटरी ऑर्गन इन अ जेनिटल ऑर्गन. एंड फॉर द माउथ वी हैव अ स्टमक. अगर माउथ से भी अंदर जाता है कोई माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म, देन वी हैव द हाइड्रोक्लोरिक एसिड व्हिच इज फाउंड इन आवर स्टमक. वी हैव स्टडीड इन डाइजेस्टिव सिस्टम that HCl is responsible to inhibit the growth of the microorganism. So अगर ट्रिक के साथ कोई माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म हमारे माउथ में चला भी गया तो कोई डरने की बात नहीं है, वहां पे HCl है. बट अगर उसमें भी गड़बड़ हो जाए, राइट, अगर मान लो हमारा जो पैथोजन है, इफ द पैथोजन इज नॉट हैविंग एंट्री थ्रू दीज ओपनिंग्स, अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट, इफ वी गेट अ कट इन आवर स्किन, okay, if we get a cut in our skin, then the microorganism or foreign element is able to directly enter into the bloodstream of our body, right? So in a bloodstream we have different types of cell. So here comes our cellular barrier. Okay, here comes our cellular barrier. That means cells are going to protect our body. So as you know, the lymph and the blood both are the circulatory connective tissue. They circulate throughout our body, and in these two lymphatic or in these two fluids, different WBCs are found. So they can be eosinophil, they can be neutrophil, NK cells, dendritic cells, macrophage, or mast cell. Depending on the antigen which is entering, or depending on the pathogen, or you can say microorganism entering in our body, we are able to fight against them. Okay, if our cellular barrier also become irresponsible, or the response of the cellular barrier becomes slow, then we have the cytokine barrier. That means the secretion which is made by your T lymphocytes. These are the chemical substances which are going to interact with your foreign element or pathogen to encounter them. Okay, so we have four types of barrier. In first barrier we have skin. In second barrier, we have mucosal lining of our respiratory and genital region and the HCl in stomach. Third, the cellular barrier, where we are responsible to fight against the microorganism or pathogen through the WBCs. And last is our cytokine barrier. Okay, so this is about the innate immunity. Immunity work on these four different levels. Okay, is this clear to everyone? Okay, so now move to the question. Okay, so which of the following barrier does not come under innate immunity? Our question says, which barrier is not coming under the innate immunity? We have just discussed our innate immunity. So your options are physical barrier, that is skin. Physiological barrier, that is mucus and HCl. C, complex barrier. D, cellular barrier. So, yes, very good. Only 50% of you have given answer. Please give your answers fast. 5 seconds are left. Okay, very good. So as you can see, 50% of you have given the option C. Very good. So option C is right. Just we have studied that the innate immunity have 4 different types of barrier. Physical barrier, our skin, physiological barrier, mucus and HCl, cellular barrier, WBCs, and 4th cytokine barrier, that is T lymphocytes or cytokines, right? So physical barrier was there, physiological barrier was there, cellular barrier was there. So the answer is complex barrier. Okay, so for this question, answer was correct. Okay, now moving to the response. Initially, when the response generated, okay, now we are moving towards the adaptive immunity. So whenever a foreign element or pathogen enters inside our body, okay, so our body produce 2 types of response, okay, one after another. Initial we have the primary immune response. चलो एग्जाम्पल ले लेते हैं, ठीक है. Now we are taking an example. For example, okay, we have found a traitor in a particular area. We have found a traitor, but still our immune system is not good. Okay, we are just having the police force. Okay, मान लेते हैं हमारा एरिया है. In our area we have recognized some traitor, but for that traitor, to encounter that traitor, we do not have any specialized force. We are just only having a police force. So what that do them? They are not that well trained to encounter that traitor or terrorist. Okay, so at that time they will start encountering them, they start fighting them, but their fighting action is not so good. Okay, उनका fighting action इतना ज़्यादा powerful नहीं रहता. So they will slowly start fighting them and they will reach a position when they completely encountering that pathogen. Okay, now as the pathogen get eliminated, the immune response start decreasing. So this is taking around 28 days. If our body is getting the first exposure to a particular pathogen, then it takes time to make strategy and fight against. For that, it required 28 days. Okay, but when we talk about if that traitor is already recognized by us, if we know, अगर मान लो हमारे एरिया में चोरी हो जाती है, okay, so initially आप कुछ नहीं कर पाए, but when you place the CCTV camera, now you able to recognize it because the CCTV camera has captured his picture. So in the very same way, in the initial exposure, we have produced the memory, okay, memory of that pathogen by the help of B cells. Now these B cells are very smart. They always keep the memory of that particular pathogen throughout the life or very long period of time. So this is the pathogen, okay, and this is the memory cell. Whenever this memory cell encounters or meets with a pathogen, it remember it. Okay, so whenever in a second time this pathogen again encounter, what is doing? It is again or you can say invading our body. When the pathogen again invade the body, so in a meal time of its second invasion, the memory cells start producing signal and it will keep in mind and keep making our cells ready to fight against them. So now these B cells start produces antibodies. Okay, these are the proteins which are responsible to circulate in our blood, and they are specific to a particular protein, as we are going to study in later slides, that each and every antibody is specific to a particular antigen or a protein. Okay, we'll discuss it later in a detail. So these antibodies, whenever encounter a pathogen, they will जल्दी से जाके आपके जो टी सेल्स हैं उनको एक्टिवेट कर देंगे. ओके, कि नहीं नहीं कोई इन्वेडर आया है जिसमें हम काम नहीं कर सकते, चलो एक स्पेशल फोर्स को बुलाते हैं. सो हियर टी सेल्स कम, and by the help of T cells and antibodies which are secreted by the B cells, we are able to completely eliminate those pathogens within a period of 7 to 14 days. Now you can see in an initial response our body took longer period of time, but in a second response our body came over that pathogen in a very short period of time. So that is our primary, when the body meets the pathogen initially, and then we have the secondary response when the body is encountering that pathogen for the second time. Okay, so there are two types of responses which is produced in adaptive immunity. First is Hemural response. Okay, that Hemural response is generated by the B cells. As I've told you, whenever, for example, this is our host, our transgenic mice. In this mice, we have injected some pathogen. Okay, as the pathogen enters in the body of our host, this pathogen is completely unknown to us. Okay, so this pathogen is not going to be recognized as self. Okay, when this happens, the B cells get activated. Okay, the B cells get activated and they produce the signal to the T cell. But how? So they get converted into the plasma cell, which start producing antibody. But for the production of antibody, they again need a higher response. एक strong stimuli चाहिए, वो आएगा T cells. So for T cells, whenever our initial WBCs like macrophages, they digest some pathogen, they will represent their protein, that is antigen, to our T cells. Okay, when T cells encounter these antigen, they get differentiated. Okay, they can be T helper cell or they can be T cytokine cells. Okay, these T helper cells help in the secretion of cytokines. They will produce cytokines, and they also produces a strong stimulus to our B cells to produce more antibody. अब यहाँ देखो, B cell ने initially antibody release करी, but that is lower in amount. जैसे ही उसको एक और strong signal मिला, कहाँ से? T helper cell से, then it started producing the high amount of antibody. अब हमारे पास antibody बहुत ज़्यादा है. Now these antibodies start circulating in our body with the blood. Okay, so these antibodies which are found in a blood, and these antibodies encounter with with antigen to eliminate it, is your Hemural response. Okay, but when we talk about the cellular response, in cellular response we have seen that two types of T cells are formed, helper cells and cytokine cells. Okay, so these T helper cells also helping the TC cells to convert into cytotoxic cells. Now these cells are able to recognize the infected cell. As you know, whenever a pathogen attacks your cell will produce some proteins, okay, on its surface. So those proteins are recognized. As you can see, आपका जो T cell है, इसके ऊपर भी एक रिसेप्टर है, और जो इन्फेक्टेड सेल है, इसके ऊपर भी एक रिसेप्टर है. ओके, विद दैट जो आपका TC सेल है, डिफरेंशिएटेड मैच्योर TC सेल है, ये इस इन्फेक्टेड सेल के साथ बाइंड करेगा और इसको डिस्ट्रॉय करने में हेल्प करेगा. Okay, so this is how your cellular response, that means by the help of cell, our body is encountering a pathogen. Okay, so adaptive immunity is of two types. First is it is producing two type of response. If we are talking about the adaptive immunity, it is producing two types of response: humoral, which is by the production of antibody which circulates throughout our blood plasma. Okay, and another is cellular response, which is taken care by the TC cells by a to encounter the infected cells. Okay, so the TC cells है वो infected cells के साथ काम कर रहे हैं, whereas the antibodies are actually encountering the antigens. These are the proteins produced by your pathogen. Okay, protein produced by pathogen. Okay. Now moving to antibody. काफी देर से हम एंटीबॉडी करे जा रहे हैं, अब पता चलता है कि एंटीबॉडी है क्या. नाउ लेट्स डिस्कस द एंटीबॉडीज. ओके, so as you can see, this Y-shaped structure is of antibody. There are two different types of chains are found. This H chain is heavy chain. Okay, heavy polypeptide chain. This small red color overlapping chains are light chain or L chains of polypeptide, that is protein. They together make our antibody. So here we have two light chains and two heavy chains. Okay, so we can write H2L2 or L2H2 for the structure of antibody. And these light chain and heavy chains are joined together by a particular bond. These are the sulfur bonds. Okay, so the heavy chain and light chain are both joined together by a specific bond, that is sulfur bond, and these bonds are maintaining the structure of our antibody. Now at one side you can see a cup shaped cavity is there. Okay, the base of this is the base of our antibody. This base is providing attachment. Okay, this base is going to attach on a cell, whereas these two regions, the Y के जो दो region है, these are known as variable regions. Okay, they are known as variable regions. These variable regions are specific for the shape of a particular antibody. They are specific for the shape, और या फिर कह सकते हैं हम पर्टिकुलर एंटीजन की. ओके, एज यू कैन सी हियर वी हैव 5 different types of antigen: antigen A, antigen B, antigen C, antigen D, and antigen E. The variable region having a semicircular structure, right? यहाँ पे एक semicircular shape है. So there only that antigen is able to bind which is having a structure in a semicircular form. So out of these 5 antibodies, only antibody E is there which is having a semicircular shape at the bottom. So you can see only antigen A is binding here. Okay, so we can say this antibody is specific for a antigen only. So if our body is encountering for example 2 to 3 pathogens are invading our body, but our body has already encountered out of those 3 one pathogen. Okay, so our body is having the antibodies only for that one pathogen which we have initially encountered. This is how our humoral immunity works. This is how the memory is produced. Okay. So next is types of antibodies. We have total 5 types of antibodies depending on their structure. So these 5 types of antibodies, they can be monomer, dimeric, or they can be pentameric. So we have total 5 types of antibody: antibody A, antibody E, antibody D. They are all having single H2L2 structure. So we can say antibody G, E, and D are the monomeric antibodies. Whereas you can see there are two H2L2 structures are present in IgA, which is joined by some joining chain and secretory protein. So you can see इनको एकदम अच्छे से कस के बांध के रखा हुआ है किसने? Secretory protein ने. So here two H2L2 structures are found. So IgA is our dimeric antibody, whereas IgM is a pentameric. First, second, third, fourth, fifth. Okay, so you can see here pentamer region is formed. Pentameric region is formed. So total we have the 5 H2L2 structures. So our IgM antibody is the pentameric in nature. Okay, is it clear? So we have studied that antibody is formed of two regions, two heavy, two light chains. That is why its formula is H2L2. And out of these, how many H2L2 chains are present in or forming our antibody? Our antibodies are differentiated into 3 categories: monomeric, dimeric, and pentameric. So we have total 5 types of antibody: IgA, G, E, D, E, or M. So out of these 5, and antibody G, E, and D are monomeric, whereas IgA dimeric है or IgM pentameric. Is it clear to everyone? Okay. Now move to our adaptive immunity. Okay. In adaptive immunity, we are talking about the active immunity. So this active immunity can be of 2 types. They can be natural or they can be produced by vaccination. Natural, for example, every day you are like when the weather is changing, you easily get cold. Okay. So are you aware of this? Whenever we get the cold, every time we are invaded by some or we are infected by some new virus, because our body is able to fight that particular virus which has already caused the cold. So in natural immunity, we naturally get infection. Okay. And by getting infection, we produce memory. And through memory, we produce a cellular response and humoral response. Okay. That is comes under active immunity. Or in vaccination, see, in vaccination, like we are using nowadays COVID vaccines, Covaxin, Covishield, there are several types of vaccines are there. So if we are already injected, अगर वो भी छोड़ दो, बचपन से कितनी सारी इंजेक्शन खाते आए हो, जब से पैदा हुए हैं हर महीने कोई ना कोई एक आध इंजेक्शन तो लग ही जाता था. Those injections are carrying the dead microorganism, dead or weakened microorganism. If our body is injected with some dead microorganism, still the dead body is there, but that dead body is of some foreign person, so our body recognize that dead person. Okay, उस microorganism को recognize करेगा and it will stimulate our immune response to generate memory. So here we are producing the active immunity through artificial method. Okay, here we are producing the active immunity through artificial method. So we can say our active immunity can be natural, where we own self getting infected by some microorganism, or it can be artificial if we are injecting some dead microorganism in a for a precautious manner, so that in future whenever we get invaded by that pathogen or infected by that pathogen, our body always remain active. Okay, always remain ready to encounter that. Okay, next move to the passive immunity. When we are talking about passive immunity, it can also be natural or it can be artificial. Okay, when we are talk about the natural, so when a child is born or whenever an individual is born, he or she always gains some antibodies from his or her mother. Okay, so here the antibodies which are found in the body of an individuals are maternal antibody, which are gifted by to us by our mother. Okay, so when a child is born or infant is born, it is already having some antibody. The another dose of antibody is given by the colostrum, that is the first milk of mother. Then we have the immunoglobulins, that is treatment, that is artificial. For example, you got some snake bite. Okay, you have some snake bite. So when you get some snake bite, in that case you have to inject antivenom, right? Because during the snake bite your body is injected with some poison. Okay, अब उसके लिए तो आप वेट नहीं करोगे ना कि when your body will recognize it and will produce the immune response to it. In that meantime, the person will be dead. So for that condition, we have to inject a person with already produced antibody. Okay, so that is known as immunoglobulin treatment, in which we are injecting a person with already produced antibody. Okay, so इसके लिए हम क्या कर सकते हैं? We are using the transgenic mice, transgenic organism in which we are injecting some pathogen. Okay, when that organism's immune system fight against that pathogen, so it will generate some antibodies, right? So those antibodies are against that pathogen. We extract out those antibodies and keep them stored in a purified form. And then whenever the requirement is there for that antibody, those antibody is injected in a person who got infection with a particular pathogen. Is it clear to everyone? Okay, so हमने देखा, we have seen that adaptive immunity is of two types. They can be active or they can be passive. And this active and passive immunity can also be natural or artificial. Natural, which we maintain or in which we are evolving our immune system on ourselves. But in artificial immunity, we are taking the help of some external factors to stimulate for the evolution of our immune system. Okay, so here is your question. The active immunity is due to, active immunity किसकी वजह से होगी? Your options are killer T cells, memory cells, helper T cells, or suppressor T cells. थोड़ा सा दिमाग लगाओ और सोचो, we have different types of cells. So which type of cell is responsible for creating active immunity? Which is majorly taking part in the active immunity? Because in active immunity, we are always going for the formation of memory, right? So great. So as you can see, you have given a very good answer, that is option B. So 100% answer is option B, memory cells, because active immunity only works when memory is there. Okay, and memory is produced by the B cells. So B cells are the ones which are responsible for generating active immunity, right? Now moving to the allergy, when our immune system become hypersensitive, अगर उसको कुछ भी मिले, मतलब छोटा सा, अगर मान लो एक बच्चा सा भी कोई चीज आ जाए, उस पे भी अटैक करना शुरू कर, ओके, जैसे कोई पेरेंट्स होते हैं ना, बहुत ज्यादा पॉजिटिव हो जाते हैं, राइट, आपका फ्रेंड भी आएगा तो भी 10 तरह की पूछताछ, उसी तरह हमारा इम्यून सिस्टम भी हमारे को लेके बहुत पॉजिटिव, ठीक है। अब जैसे ही कोई भी छोटी सी चीज भी आएगी, तो इट विल गेट एक्टिवेटेड, वो उसी के अगेंस्ट फाइट करना शुरू कर देगा, ओके। सो व्हेन अ पर्सन शोज हाइपर रिस्पॉन्स और हाइपर सेंसिटिविटी फॉर अ कॉमन एंटीजन, छोटा मोटा सा एंटीजन है, दैट हाइपर रिस्पॉन्स और हाइपर सेंसिटिविटी इज नोन एज एलर्जी। उस हाइपर सेंसिटिविटी को हम एलर्जी कहते हैं, ओके। So the allergy has a different types of symptoms: sneezing, labored breathing, that is heavy breathing, rashes, runny nose, edema, that is rashes on the skin, okay, cough, redness, lacrimation, that is tearing, and headache. Up, like now spring is about to come, the flower will get pollinated. At that time, pollen grains move or get mixed with the air and move from here to there. They get dispersed through that. Okay. Some people have high allergy for those pollen grain as well. So whenever they reach in close proximity of those flowers, they will start sneezing, they having their runny nose, they have the watery eyes. Okay. So these are the symptoms of our allergic response, okay. Sometimes the allergic response are so severe that it can become fetal. They leads to the fever, high fever, and they also causes the blocking or heavy breathing, okay. So drug allergy can be from anything. They can be drug allergy. There is food allergy. Heat and cold exposure also generates allergy, and some allergy from pets, insects, dust. Okay, and stress as well. अब आपको इतना स्ट्रेस होता जाएगा कि नहीं हमारा इम्यून सिस्टम इतना काम कर रहा है, क्या क्या हमें करना पड़ता है। सो इसकी भी एक एलर्जी है, ठीक है। बच्चों को खास तौर पे हो जाती है, जब मैम बहुत सारा पढ़ाती है तो सबसे ज्यादा एलर्जी होती है, इतना पढ़ना पड़ेगा, पढ़ने से सबसे पहले एलर्जी होती है, ठीक है। बट उस एलर्जी को हम अभी थोड़ा साइड करेंगे क्योंकि हमारा पूरा पढ़ने का टाइम है अभी। सो ड्रग एलर्जी, फूड एलर्जी, देयर आर सेवरल टाइप्स ऑफ एलर्जी। अब जरूरी नहीं हर एक एलर्जी हर किसी को, some person have food allergy, some have dust allergy, some have pollen grain allergy, okay. So जब भी आप डॉक्टर के पास जाते हो वो आपसे से पहले पूछ लेते हैं, भाई तुम्हें कोई एलर्जी तो नहीं है, जो तुम्हारा इम्यून सिस्टम तुम्हारे लिए कुछ ज्यादा पॉजिटिव तो नहीं है किसी चीज को लेके, okay. So how this allergic mechanism work, like a particular particle, okay, a particle which is activating our immune response, okay, or you can say hypersensitivity, which is actually stimulating the hyper response of immune system, are known as allergens, okay. So when this allergen come in contact with our body, then T helper cells are there, they encounter them, okay. By what? They are represented to the antigen by a particular antigen presenting cell. They are usually macrophages, okay. These T helper cell will help activate the B cells to produce antibody, and the antibody responsible for the allergic response is IgE. Whenever a person have a hyper immune system response, then person always having the elevated levels of the IgE. Okay, so these IgE and antibodies activates the mast cell, and mast cells releases some chemicals. These are histamine. Okay, they leads to the inflammation of that region by causing vasodilation. Okay, so yahan tak sabko clear hai? Is everything clear to everyone? We have talked about the different lymphoid organs. We have talked about the immune system. Okay, we have talked about the immunity, which was of two types, active or innate and adaptive. Then we have seen adaptive immunity is of further two types. It can be active or it can be passive. And we have seen active and passive immunity can also be of two types. They can be natural or they can be artificial. Okay. And then we have seen when our immune system become hypersensitive, the sensitivity of our immune system leads to this allergic response. Okay, and this in this allergic response, we are having the elevated levels of antibody E, and some chemicals are produced which leads to the formation of or production of inflammatory response, that is histamine. Is it clear to everyone? Koi doubt? Okay, so to treat the allergy we need antihistamines. अगर antihistamines हमारे उस पर्टिकुलर साइट पे लग जाए जिससे हिस्टामिन हमारे सेल को टच ही ना कर पाए, तो हमें एलर्जिक रिस्पॉन्स प्रोड्यूस नहीं होगा. Okay, so this is all for today. If you have any doubt, you can ask in a chat box. Okay, so no doubt is there. So your homework for today is you have to study the NCRT well, and you have to find out the 10 to 15 examples of these all: active immunity, passive immunity, and allergy. So in conclusion, you have to find out the 10 to 15 examples. Okay, to find out how these are working and go through some anti-allergic medicine. You will find some antihistamines are also in the ingredient of those anti-allergic medicine. Okay, so this is all for today. We'll continue in our next class.